What's up, everybody? This is the Booch, and welcome to episode 13 of the Boochcast reviews Darkside of the Ring, and I am very excited to be back here. This is going to be a real good one that we got for you guys this week. But before we get into that, I do have some announcements to make and a few things that I want to share. First off, I apologize for any messes that you see behind me. I've been reorganizing my speaker, trying to get it to work, and I got the microphone sitting over there, so I'm still trying to find my mic stand because I do have some comedy gigs coming up, so I've had to test my equipment, make sure it's working because the venue I'm going at doesn't have any equipment, so I have to bring my own. Thankfully, I still have equipment that I haven't used in a while, but it's working fine, and I'm able to bring it. Also, I got the garbage bag in the corner because I had some trash piling up, and I had to get it all in there and put it in that corner, and I'm sorry if it's distracting to anyone, but I figured if I address it now, you won't focus on it as much, and we can get into the show. Also, you'll notice last week with Darkside of the Ring, I put up not one, not two, but 3 different videos on during the week. And the reason I did that was because when I originally decided to do Darkside of the Ring, this review, I wanted to do them once a week and kind of space them out. But then recently, Vice came out with a trailer and announced that on May 6th will be the Season 3 premiere of Darkside of the Ring. And since my team's schedules are back up and running, and we were able to once again get together and actually put these episodes out, and because Elvis is obsessed with wanting to get things out as quick and fast as possible, so you might have heard that on the Boochcast Returns podcast that we put out on Anchor. It's also on Spotify, Breaker, and Google Podcasts. Links are in the description box. So what I wanted to do was get these videos out a little earlier than I expected, so that way by the time we get to Season 3, all these videos will be out. So just like last week, there will be multiple videos being put out within a week. So we have this video out today. This video is going to, a couple days from now, the next one will come out. A couple days from now, the next one will come out. And then we'll have the last one, which is the final days of Owen Hart, which I just finished editing because we recorded that a while back, pretty much the same day we did Bruiser Brody. That's why the setting in the background looks the same, because we recorded those two on the same day. So the final days of Owen Hart's already edited. It's going to be a while before it comes out because I'm doing these chronologically. So just want to give you guys an idea of what's going on, and obviously break a little kayfabe, which is ironic because the breaking of kayfabe is what caused the episode that's about to air right now. And of course, we're talking about the slap heard round the world. This is one that a lot of fans have been waiting for, and it's a story that I knew a little bit about because I'd seen the clip of the slap heard around the world many years ago, but I didn't quite know the history behind it. Well, after seeing it, it made it even more exciting. So I guess there's nothing left for us to do but to get it started in here. So we have right here the slap heard around the world. Now, this particular incident revolves around 2 people, and that is Dr. D, David Schultz, and John Stossel, the legendary news reporter. They were the ones that were involved in the slap. Now, the opening of the documentary talks about the importance of kayfabe. And kayfabe, now, we talked about this a lot during our review of Darkside of the Ring, but it held the most prevalence during this episode because Dr. D talked about the fact that he was a bad guy wrestler. And he said one of the key pieces of advice for bad guy wrestlers, or heels, as we call them in the business, was don't let people out there see you signing autographs. All these little kids and stuff, because then they'll say, you're not really a bad guy. No, you want them to think you're the baddest, meanest bastard to ever walk the street. And that's how you're going to make money. And in the early 80s, there were few better at playing the villain than Dr. D, David Schultz. He was big enough and mean enough to get his own way. And at the same time, he was a tremendous performer. He was destined to become one of the WWE's most notorious stars. They hated him, but they loved him. They loved to hate him. It was his job to be bad, and he could back it up. This was an era in wrestling where wrestlers believed in protecting the business, and no one took that to heart more than David Schultz. David says, One thing I am not is a fake. You can call me an entertainer, you can call me a con man, whatever you want, but don't call me fake. And I have said this numerous times, but I will continue to say it all the time because it bears repeating. The word fake is the most offensive term you can say to a professional wrestler. There is nothing you can say to a wrestler that will piss them off or insult them more than the word fake. In fact, I'm going to make a bold statement right now. Wrestlers treat the word fake the way black people treat the N-word. You call somebody black the N-word, you're getting the shit beat out of you. You say what a wrestler does is fake, those wrestlers are going to beat the shit out of you. They take it that seriously. I know some people out there are going to go, Vinny, that's a crazy comparison. Maybe it is, but it's the only way that I can truly explain to people how serious they take this word. Do not say to a wrestler that what they do is fake. They don't like that word. They hate that word. It disrespects everything they do. It disrespects the pain that they go through, the time away they spend from their families, everything they sacrificed to make it in this business, the dues they had to pay. And when you say that, you are deeply offending a wrestler. And they will do whatever they have to do to prove to you they are not a fake, even if it means ending your own life. And for most of the 20th century, professional wrestling was a closed society. The rules of the game were never revealed to the public. Wrestlers lived by a secret code that maintained the illusion of good and evil in the squared circle. That code was, make the fights look real, even if the matches are predetermined. That's why a lot of times you see them doing certain moves or behaving a certain way to make you believe the match is real. That's why most wrestling purists and a lot of people like myself don't like spot monkey circus wrestling because it doesn't make the fight look real. Because when you're doing high spot after high spot after high spot, a lot of them, you can clearly tell the other person is cooperating with them to do it. And the trick is, you're supposed to do a move and make it feel like that guy took the move. That's why selling is important, and that's why delivering the move is also important. You have to make it look brutal, and the other guy has to make it look like he's in pain. That's how you work together to make a match make sense. You have to do things in the context of trying to win, not lose. That is what you have to do. That is why spot moves are good if they're planned properly and they're timed and placed in the correct spot to where when the move is done, you can register as a person going, all right, that makes sense. The problem with wrestling today is that a lot of these guys don't do that. They just want to do all the high spots because they're more concerned with getting 5 stars than being a star. But at the dawn of a pro wrestling revolution, the old traditions were changing faster than some performers could keep up with. Dr. D started watching wrestling in 1972-1973 and said, this is not hard. So he went over to see Herb Welch, who wrote the book, How to Become a Champion. He was one of the biggest wrestling stars in the South from the time of the Great Depression to the 1950s. He learned from the pioneers of wrestling who came from the carnivals, because that's where wrestling used to be. It used to be in the carnival. It used to be a carnival circus show, which is ironic, seeing as how I'm saying there's a lot of circus shit going on. And it was the last place in the country that you could go to literally learn from a guy who was there for the formation of organized pro wrestling. So Herb Welch was kind of there with those guys who practically invented organized pro wrestling and took it out of the carnivals and made it its own thing. And he was the one who ended up training Dr. D. So Herb Welch trained Dr. D for the business. And his method of training was to take these guys and beat the piss out of them in a barn on his farm where he lived. And the reason most wrestling trainers do this, when you first get into the business, they try to beat the piss out of you. They try to break a bone. They try to rip your skin off your flesh. They want to hurt you because they want to see how bad you really want this. And if you're not willing to take the punishment, then you're gone and they don't have to waste time with you. Because everybody tries to get into this business, but they protected it so much, they wanted to make sure you were worthy of being a wrestler before they actually trained you and how it's really done. But in the beginning, they just beat the piss out of you. And unfortunately for Dr. D, Herb Welch was a salty, mean old bastard that would go into the locker room and take a dump. And then take a handful of shit and rub it in his armpit. And then when he went out to the ring, the first thing he would do is tie it with his opponent and put him in a headlock. Then he would start grinding their head as hard as he could until the opponent begged him to let go. Now, the reason he was trying to hurt Dr. D was to toughen him up and see if he could truly be one of the boys, and was capable of doing this, as I mentioned before. After a couple of months of training there, he got in great shape. So Herb would bring other wrestlers to the barn to come work out with him. And they would tell Herb that every time they do something to him, he fights back. Because Dr. D thought all this was real because he was getting really hurt. So naturally, if you assume that it's real, you're going to really fight. So Herb finally sat him down and told him he has what it takes to be successful and be one of the boys. So he smartens him up and tells him it's all a work and that the business is centered around kayfabe. Now, back in those days, if a trainer sat you down and told you what the business was, that's what we call smartening people up. It means that they're telling you, hey, this is a work, this is predetermined, these are fixed fights. But they don't do that to just anybody. They only do that when they feel like you're ready for the big time. When they feel like you can do this. You can be one of us. Now we're giving you our secrets. We're giving you the tools. Now, kayfabe means you keep the illusion a secret. Also, if you're in a rivalry with somebody, you're not seen together in public. And you know that we mentioned this during the Montreal Screwjob episode. Desmond and I mentioned that, where, two wrestlers don't show up together to the same building. You don't go out to dinner. You don't go out drinking. You go your way, they go theirs. So we mentioned a little bit of that on the Montreal Screwjob. This is more the extended version of that. And wrestling was like the mafia. You're in a secret society and don't spill the beans, or as they would say, expose the business. That's why a lot of the circus shit you see today would not fly in this era, because it makes you believe it's a work. You don't expose the business. You don't tell people this is a work. They're not supposed to know. Even if they figure it out on their own and they're still watching, you still don't show them that. You don't insult the fans' intelligence. Now, David says to be a pro wrestler, you first have to learn how to work. Know the moves, the holds, and the timing. Know what's going to make the people mad. Know what's going to make them feel good. He found success in wrestling being himself with the dial turned up to 20. And he was basically a crazy redneck hillbilly from Tennessee. And that's what he brought to the ring every time. And that's what he did. And that's the key thing. Obviously, like I said, there's some moves you have to know. But you got to know the timing, know when to do it, and you got to know how to invoke reaction from the crowd. If you're a bad guy and you know what's going to make the people mad, do that. If you're a babyface and you know what's going to make the audience feel good, you do that. That's the key thing. The babyface's job is to make the audience feel good. The heel's job is to make the audience feel bad. That's it. If you're a babyface and you're getting booed, you suck at your job. If you're a heel and you're getting cheered, you suck at your job. That is the job of a wrestler. So you have to decide which one you want to be. Do you want to be the babyface or do you want to be the heel? If you want to be the babyface, you got to make sure that audience loves you. If you're the heel, you got to make sure that audience hates you to the point where they tear up pictures of you. They want to slash the tires on your car. Hopefully they don't know where your car is parked. But still, that's the point. You have to make the audience believe. Because that's what draws the money. Now, Schultz was trained to never break kayfabe. You never break it. When you're in public, you are Dr. D. All the time. Privately, you can be yourself. But when you're out in public, they see Dr. D. They are Dr. D. You never sell them that you are anything less than Dr. D. Now, many other wrestlers thought he was mean because he made them work hard. Hogan was one of them. Now, the late 1970s, of course, we're talking about Hulk Hogan. Back then, during Dr. D's era, he was a young, up-and-coming wrestler from Augusta, Georgia. And he first crossed paths with Schultz while working the Florida circuit. Now, when they met, Hogan didn't have any money. I know it's hard to believe. Actually, it's not, because he lost a fuck ton of money in the early 2000s. But anyway. And he was living in his van. He was literally living in a van. So Schultz invited him to come stay in his apartment, and they became really good friends. In the ring, they were natural adversaries. And eventually, their epic confrontations attract the attention of Vince McMahon as the WWE is expanding nationwide. In 1983, McMahon handpicks Hogan to be his centerpiece attraction. His goal was to systematically take over the wrestling world. McMahon offered Hogan a chunk of money to go, and Hogan also vouched for Dr. D because he told Vince he could make money with this guy. So when Hogan, a lot of people say Hogan didn't do anything for anybody. That's a fucking lie. But, Hogan, when he went to WWE, they were going to put the belt on him, have him beat the Iron Sheik and all that. Hogan literally said, bring in Dr. D as a heel, I can make money with him. And their chemistry was already a proven draw. So Dr. D was brought in to be the top heel to feud with Hogan. Because I don't care how great of a babyface you are, how popular you are, you're only as good as the villain that you face. Every top babyface needs a top heel. You need that villain that can be a great dance partner for you. And the best of the best know how to scout those people. So Hogan knew, as big a star as I am, Dr. D is the perfect heel that can help keep that star power going. Now, Vince told Dr. D he was going to make sure he made enough money for the rest of his life. He wanted to be the baddest bad guy there is. And that's what Vince was looking for. And the thing is, he was not a cookie cutter heel. He was a wild and crazy guy, and that was starting to get over. On a show called TNT Tuesday Night Titans, they did a segment where Vince was at Dr. D's house, and he was shooting a rifle in his living room while showing off his gun collection. Then at his house, he's yelling at his wife to go scrub the floors and cook dinner and threaten to slap the smile off his son's face. People bought into it so much, the sheriff's office and the police department came by Vince's office and asked for Dr. D's address because they had warrants for his arrest on the charges of child and spousal abuse. Vince had to explain to them that was a show and it was scripted. So Vince had to smarten up the cops because they're about to go arrest Dr. D. Because in reality, those weren't David's guns. Someone who worked at the TV station owned those guns and brought them to the set. The house wasn't really his, and the wife and kids were paid actors. Dr. D wasn't married. At least not that I'm aware of, but they didn't mention him being married and having a family, so I'm assuming he's not married and doesn't have a family. But the wife and kids were paid actors. And that's how great it was. That's believability. When you got people to believe so much that police officers are going to show up to your house to arrest you because they see the way you're treating somebody and they forget it's a TV show. That is what made wrestling great. The fact that people could believe in what they're seeing on the screen, not knowing the whole time it's a work. And to me, that's the best form of wrestling. When you see somebody going through something and you actually believe there's abuse going on, even though it's staged. That's the thing that's missing in wrestling today. Because a lot of these guys either can't act or they overact. That's the problem. And it was designed to get people to hate him because the more they hated him, the more money they all made. The only problem is it starts to attract unwanted attention. Now, this is where we get to John Stossel. John Stossel in the 80s was a rising journalist for ABC News. He made a name for himself taking down shady companies and corrupt businessmen. Now he's chosen to turn his investigative lens towards another highly lucrative industry. One he believes is deceiving its audience. Now, John Stossel wrestled in high school, and it bothered him that people thought pro wrestling was real. Rather than a scripted event where the winner is predetermined and they wear funny clothes and have pretend anger and bullshit. John says he found it interesting that this company was successful by lying to the public. Now, the one point John Stossel makes that I can somewhat relate to is the fact that as a high school wrestler, it bothers him that people thought pro wrestling was real. The only difference is, as a high school wrestler, what bothered me was the fact that people thought that high school wrestling was fake. Or when you say, hey, I'm a wrestler, they automatically assume pro wrestling. As a former high school wrestler who took wrestling seriously, I can understand that frustration on that level. But the rest of it is fucking stupid because it's no different than if you went to a play. They're supposed to make you believe what's happening on that stage. Is that a problem? I don't know what the fuck John Stossel thought he was trying to accomplish, but if he thought that he was trying to take down a shady company, he wasn't doing a very good job of that. It's professional wrestling. It's entertainment. There's no evil con going on here. He's just a fucking idiot. Now, the number one rule was not to expose the business because otherwise it would cost the wrestlers their livelihood. There was an expose in the 1930s in New York that killed wrestling for about 15 years. The headline said, "A thrilling and dramatic expose of modern wrestling fakes coming soon." And apparently that killed the New York territory for 15 years because people thought, oh, this is fake, we're not going to go. Now, 50 years later, the stakes are just as high for WWE and for Dr. D. Kayfabe was a religion. Being a pro wrestler to Dr. D meant there were standards he had to stand up to. Now, John Stossel reached out to Eddie Mansfield because he wanted someone to demonstrate how wrestling was done. Now, Eddie Mansfield was known as the Continental Lover, a rich woman's lover and a poor girl's dream. He originally played baseball and injured his arm and could no longer play. So he got into the wrestling business. He loved it as a kid and was self-taught when he broke in. He could draw money and he could talk on the mic. The downside for him was the payoffs. You would draw these sellout houses and make pennies on the dollar. There's no health care, no nothing. Those were the only issues Eddie had with the business. He hated that he didn't get treated the way professional athletes are supposed to be treated. He felt they were being treated like the scum of the earth. He talks about how the business should give the boys health insurance and a 401k. If you want to be a big-time promoter, set an example. And obviously, this is an ongoing topic that has happened for a long, long, long time. And here's my stance on all of this. I was going to make this clear right now. I believe if you are an independent wrestler and you wrestle for multiple promotions at a time, like let's say you're working for one promotion here one week, then you're going somewhere else the other week, then you're going over here and over there and over there and over there and over there, and you have no ties to any promotion. You're just traveling the world, going to different spots. Then if you're doing that, then you don't deserve health insurance or a 401k or anything like that. But if you are a wrestler who is exclusive to one company, whatever that company is, if you only work for that one company, if you wrestle for that company, if you announce for that company, if you set up the ring for that company, if you only are allowed to work for one organization and that promoter is telling you not to go work with anybody else, you work with me and only me, that promoter should be giving that person health insurance and a 401k. If someone is exclusive to you and not allowed to work anywhere else, that person should never have to be without anything. You should be able to take care of everything that one person needs. And everybody else who's doing just in and out spots doesn't get shit from you, except their pay. But the guys who are working for you and only you, they're the ones that deserve the health insurance and the 401k and deserves to be treated like an athlete or employee should be treated. And that's what I believe. If you're a promoter and you want somebody to be exclusive to you, you should be able to take care of that person's wants and needs completely. And if you're not willing to do that, don't ask them to be exclusive. Because for you to ask someone to be exclusive and not take care of them, you are preventing that person from providing for himself and his family by making him work with you and only you, especially if you're somebody who doesn't run shows often. If someone is exclusive to you, you take care of that person or free them up to work other places and make money. Now, he says he didn't quit the wrestling business. The wrestling business quit him. He says the reason was because he wouldn't kick back 20% of his money. The booker at the time wanted to control people. They did it to the other guys who agreed to it. And because Eddie didn't, they stopped booking him. Now, whether or not that's the true story, I don't know. I hear other things, and we'll get into those later on in this review. But I know we talked about this with Fabulous Moolah, where she was taking a big percentage of people's money. No promoter should take a percentage of anybody's money. You pay them for their work. The only thing you should take a percentage of maybe is certain gimmicks, depending on the situation. Maybe that. But if it's like somebody's like selling gimmicks, but they're selling gimmicks with your logo on them, obviously you get a percentage of that money. But if they're selling their own gimmicks they made themselves, don't fuck with that. You know, something like that. Like, obviously, you know, like, for example, I have my own t-shirts that I sell. No wrestling promoter should be allowed to take a percentage of my t-shirts. But if I had, let's say I had a stack of UCW t-shirts and I wanted to sell them at a comedy show, obviously I should kick a percentage of that to the UCW because those are their shirts, not mine. But if I'm selling my own Booch 365 t-shirts, I keep all the money from this. Or if I wanted to sell these right here, Pizza Baby t-shirts, I should be within my rights to sell these. And yes, I am doing a shameless plug for these, and you can get them at storefrontier.com/Vinny Bucci, aka the Booch. I'll put a special link in the description box if you want to get your own t-shirts. Also, as quick as he was up, he was out, Eddie Mansfield. And he decided since they didn't care about him, he was going to go on national television and tell the world what kind of scam they are running on the boys. He made one phone call to ABC. John Stossel said they couldn't just say it was fake. They also had to reveal and entertain because it's still television. That is true. So he needed a legit professional wrestler to demonstrate, and Eddie was more than willing. John got in the ring, and Eddie showed him the tricks and trades of wrestling. How to jump, how to be thrown, and how to land without hurting somebody. He also explained that they are told who wins and who loses, but he also showed them the blade. Blading involves cutting yourself with a razor, or in some cases a scalpel, like New Jack used to use, so you would bleed. Because the wrestlers didn't want to use fake blood, because that would prove that it was a work, and we've only seen fake blood a handful of times in wrestling, and all those times it sucked. So they would bleed for real to keep up the illusion. That's why when you saw blood coming down their face, that's actual blood coming down their face. You know, you either get busted open the hard way or you blade. Now, Eddie claims the reason he showed the blade was because John kept pestering him to do it. But Eddie didn't want to just expose the business. He wanted to talk about the scams promoters were pulling on the boys and how they are treated. But all John Stossel cared about was proving that wrestling was fake. And that is where the problem lies. And this is why John Stossel and certain news reporters are fucking assholes. In fact, I'll even put Nancy Disgrace in here, even though she doesn't have a show anymore, thank God. Because that's all they care about. They care about pushing their narrative. This is why news reporters, especially a lot of journalists today, don't get any respect. And why people call them fake news. Because they don't care about the real problems. All they care about is pushing their narrative and their belief. If it doesn't fit your narrative, you're not going to report on it because you don't care about the truth. You care about your own selfish, pussy fucking purposes. Now, some keep the blade in their mouth, some keep it in their tights, some hide it with tape. Now, Dr. D and Jim Cornette believe that Eddie's intentions were bullshit and that he was a has-been, a never was, a wimp, and someone who did it to get free publicity. Eddie says Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, but forgot to free the pro wrestlers, and that it was time to step up and take care of the boys so they could have a future with benefits. John Stossel then decided to target the WWE because he needed someone in his expose to say, no, this isn't fake, this is all real, so he could have back and forth dialogue. So Dr. D walks into Madison Square Garden and goes into the locker room, says hi to the boys, and puts his gear on. Vince walks in the locker room and he says, there's a guy here making a joke out of the business. I want you to go out there and interview with him, blast him, tear his ass up, stay in character, be Dr. D. John Stossel goes backstage and interviews the Iron Sheik. Afterwards, Vince introduces him to Dr. D, and John says he was a little frightening. He asks him, why you call Dr. D? And he says, why not? Jim Cornette said it was a recipe for disaster. Why would anyone go up to Schultz? That's a Very good question. So, John Stossel is talking about the business, and he goes, "Is this a tough business?" He goes, "Of course it's a tough business. I wouldn't be in it if it wasn't." John goes, "What makes it tough?" And he said, "Because only the tough survive. That's why you ain't in it. That's why this goof holding the camera, he ain't in it. That's why those people standing in the corner over there, they ain't in it. Because it's a tough business." And John Stossel was so uncomfortable, he almost didn't ask him the question. So now Stossel says, "I'm going to ask a standard question." And Dr. D's listening. He goes, "Standard question." Like he's trying to pay attention. And he says, "I think this is fake." And Dr. D remembers that Vince wanted him to stay in character, and he would slap the shit out of somebody that said that. So he did. He slaps him right in the face and goes, "Is that fake?" And John's thinking, what the hell just happened here? John got whacked in the ear and went down. And he stupidly, according to him, got back up again. Now Dr. D is yelling, "What the hell is wrong with you? That's an open hand slap." David was always taught, if a man get back up, you got to knock him back down. Because if he gets up, he might hurt you. So when he got back up and he said, "You think this is fake?" and slapped him again in the other ear. John's ears were ringing and he got scared and took off running. Eddie had apparently warned him beforehand not to mess with Dr. D. Now, John Stossel is a fucking idiot. I'm going to tell you why he's a fucking idiot. Because if he had just said, and this is another issue of properly wording your questions, and I've made mistakes wording questions in the past, so I know what this is like. If he had said, a lot of people out there have said wrestling is fake. How do you feel about that? If he had done that and worded it that way, put the blame on other people. Don't say it's your opinion. Say other people think. Other people say. There's rumors going around. There's ways to word your question. Put it on them. The moment you say, "I think this is fake," you are now putting yourself in the position where someone's going to whoop your ass. That was a stupid thing for John Stossel to do. So now, Dr. D didn't think too much about it because he slapped him for having bad manners. The way parents would slap their kids back then if they behaved like that. Now luckily there are some parents who still do that today when their kids misbehave. And to those parents, I salute you. Those of you who don't, y'all need fucking therapy. Moments later, he goes down to the ring for his match with Antonio Inoki. He has no idea that backstage, John Stossel is pissed off and threatening to press charges. After the match, Vince tells David to go back to the hotel. The next day, David goes up to Stanford to meet with Vince, and he tells him the New York Athletic Commission has suspended him and that he was going to pay the fine and get the whole thing straightened out, and that he was going to send him to Japan to work until this whole thing dies down. 8 weeks later, the special airs on 2020, and wrestlers are outraged. Cornette says it was trying to kill the business and take money away from them and their families. Eddie got death threats and people trying to plant cocaine on him. He realized he had to get out of the South or he was going to go to jail for either killing someone or someone was going to kill him. He moved to New York and had 4 FBI guys with him on the plane to make sure he got to New York safe. When you expose the business, you're not messing with the promoters. You're messing with the boys. They're more worried about what they will do to them than the penalty from the law. Now, Eddie wishes he never did the expose with John Stossel. He said it cost him his career, but that's okay because they did him a favor. Because he's better off today than he ever would have been in wrestling. Pro wrestling doesn't take care of the people that make the money, and it never has. And all he hears is people saying, "You got to protect the business." And he responds to that by saying, "Well, why would I want to protect something that doesn't protect me?" And there's going to be some wrestling fans out there that aren't going to like what I'm about to say. But in this instance, I'm in total agreement with Eddie. Why would you want to protect a business that doesn't protect you? Because there are times where the wrestling business, it's a tough business to be in. It will chew you up, it will spit you out, and it will kick you to the curb. It's done with you. And the sad part is most fans will do that too. There's a lot of wrestlers who are talented that fans just turned on because they didn't want to see them anymore. And there are a lot of instances where the business doesn't help people. So why are you protecting something that doesn't want to protect you? Why are you caring about something that doesn't care about you? There's a lot of flaws in the pro wrestling business. And if you're doing right by the business and the business isn't taking care of you, then at some point you got to say, fuck the business, and you got to walk out. Now, I'm not saying that Eddie was good to the business or nothing like that. What I'm saying is, in general, I'm only protecting the business if the business protects me. If the business is not doing right by me, I'm not going to do right by the business. Because I don't do that one-way street bullshit where I treat somebody like I treat somebody with the utmost integrity and respect, and they can treat me like dog shit. I don't play that. I did that for 13 years in retail. I'll never go back to that type of lifestyle ever again for as long as I shall live. I don't live in a world where people can treat me however they want, but I always have to be nice to them. Suck a dick. You want my respect? Earn it. If the business wants me to protect it, do right by me. You know? And there's times and I've been in the wrestling business for a few years. Let me tell you something. There's times when the business did do right by me, and there were times where the business didn't do right by me. And every time the business did right by me, I stood by the business and defended it every moment, every second of every day. And during that time when the business didn't do right by me, I told the business to fuck off. I had no problem doing it either. So I have a lot of respect for the business. That's only because the business still respects me. The day it disrespects me is the day I tell it to fuck off. And if it disrespects me enough times, I'll tell it to fuck off forever. Meanwhile, in Japan, the controversy from 2020 follows Schultz there. First thing they want him to do is hit a reporter. Schultz says he's not hitting anybody unless they write it down as part of the script. They agreed, and the reporter comes in with a camera. Schultz tells him, I'll slap you when you fall down. So he does it, but not as hard as he hit John. Because with John Stossel, he was shoot slapping him. He was being a prick. This is a work. So obviously Schultz is hitting him hard enough to make it look real, but not hard enough to really do any damage. Tokyo News goes crazy with the pictures. People call in 2020 to check on John Stossel's well-being. His ears were ringing and loud noises caused him to have serious headaches. He couldn't even change his daughter's diapers because the crying would trigger the headaches. He felt that Vince and the WWE need to be taught a lesson that they can't beat up reporters, and he sued them to get compensation for his pain. Really? Well, I think John Stossel needed to be taught a lesson and not being a fucking prick. And this is the one thing about John Stossel that pisses me off. All these years later from this incident, John Stossel had a golden opportunity here on Darkside of the Ring to give his side of the story, show a little bit of remorse, or maybe word things differently in a way where he could maybe come off as either naive to stuff or a little bit of a nice guy. But just the attitude and the demeanor he has just screams fucking prick. There is nothing likable about John Stossel. The fact that he has a daughter slaps me because I'm thinking, what woman in their right mind would fuck this man? I'd like to meet this woman and find out her IQ level. That she would actually want to have sex and actually allow this man to reproduce and have offspring. Because there's nothing likable about John Stossel. He just comes off as a prick the whole fucking time. He's the type of guy where, I'll be honest, if John Stossel talked to me the way he spoke to Dr. D, just his tone of voice and the delivery and the asshole attitude he has, I'd slap the shit out of him too. John Stossel needs to be taught a lesson that you can't go around disrespecting people just because you have a microphone and a camera. Not everybody's going to put up with your shit. Because we're real motherfuckers. The only thing you deserve is another slap in the face for doing this Darkside of the Ring interview and coming off as an even bigger prick now than you did back then. So, Dr. D went to John Stossel's lawyer to tell him the story at the advice of his lawyer because he felt Vince was not going to take care of this. When Vince gets sued, Dr. D's name is not mentioned. So Vince wants Dr. D to sign a document saying he chose to slap John on his own and Vince had no involvement. Dr. D said, I'll only sign the paper if it says I did what you told me to do because that's what happened. And this is Vince trying to relieve himself of all liability. It's like, no, motherfucker, you do have some liability. Dr. D is to blame, but so are you. Okay? You're not just going to let Dr. D be the fall guy so you can be safe. And promoters will try that fucking shit where if they're caught in a bad situation, they want you to take the fall. Never be someone's fall guy. Ever. Ever. You ain't a friend. You a new fool. I ain't serving time for no motherfuckers. No way. That's some bullshit right there. Then John Stossel says that Dr. WWE didn't even bother to examine him and just said he was holding on to the pain because he was in a lawsuit, which I'll bet was the fucking truth. I'll bet every amount of money that's the goddamn truth. John later got $280,000 in a settlement. So Vince is now getting ready for the debut of WrestleMania. He positions Hulk Hogan and Mr. T front and center in their nationwide promotion. Dr. D's name is missing entirely. David hated that Mr. T was coming into the main event of the first WrestleMania, having never wrestled and was being paid more than the wrestlers. Schultz didn't like that Mr. T was in the locker room because that is sacred ground to the boys. So Dr. D was definitely one of those guys that, you know, protects the locker room and everything else. And Mr. T, granted, is not one of the boys, but he's being brought in to do this angle. And Mr. T does have respect for the wrestling business and the people in it. And I think they realized that later on down the road. But they were doing this to get publicity for WrestleMania. Because at the time, WWE was going nationwide, but it wasn't the big billion-dollar company it was today. If WrestleMania had failed, there'd be no WWE today. That first WrestleMania was Vince taking a gamble and a risk on trying to get this company to a nationwide audience and building something big. So back then, you had to bring in celebrities to get attention, to bring money, to bring people in. Mr. T's a bigger star than most of those wrestlers. More people know who Mr. T was than most of those wrestlers do, I guarantee it. You know, Hogan was famous, but that's mostly because of Rocky III and the stuff he did in AWA. So Mr. T being brought in made perfect sense. It was a business move more than anything. So Schultz claims there was no physical altercation between him and Mr. T, and they were talking backstage, and Chief Jay Strongbow was the agent backstage. He confronts Dr. D saying Vince told him that if you were going to bother Mr. T to fire you. Schultz said, well, you better fire me then. And Jay says, okay, you're fired. Dick move. He gets dressed and goes down to the ring to watch the show because his friend Tanaka was wrestling. The cops show up because Jay called the cops, said Dr. D was a dangerous man and was about to hurt somebody and needed to get escorted out of there. They cuffed his hands and shackled his feet, and they threw him out the door at gunpoint. Which, that's excessive. Look, Dr. D had a persona, but Dr. D was not a crazy madman that was going to kill everybody. He slapped John Stossel for being a disrespectful prick. Not because he's crazy. That was extreme. He's there to watch the show. Okay? He was going to leave when it was over. Now, Hulk Hogan claims that Dr. D slapped Mr. T in the crowd, and that was what got him fired. Schultz said Hogan has a big head and used to hate when he would say that, and found it hypocritical since Hogan had put a front chin lock on Richard Belzer and choked him out on live TV. Hogan and Schultz stopped being friends after he was let go. And I've listened to Hogan talk about him in the podcast. I don't see them being friends again. But yeah, that can be a big problem. So that friendship ended, and I do remember the Richard Belzer thing, and I thought that was crazy. But again, Richard Belzer, I say the same thing. He deserved what he got. You're being a dumbass, thinking this is all a game, it's all a work. Look at me, they don't really hurt themselves. They're going to protect themselves. Again, Hogan had to protect the business. Richard Belzer was getting full of himself. He was being a cocky little shit. Choked his ass out. I don't blame him. People need to stop fucking with wrestlers. Stop assuming that because wrestling is a work, that these guys are not strong, that these guys are not badass, that these guys will not fuck you up in a fight. If you pick a fight with a wrestler, they're going to fucking kill you. Not just because they're strong, but because mentally, most of them are very unstable. They don't function well in normal society. Their brainwaves operate on a whole nother level. Don't fuck with wrestlers. I cannot emphasize that enough. So after this, Schultz tries to work the indies, but nobody wanted to work with him because Vince had him blackballed. Eventually, he left the business and became the world's greatest bounty hunter. He got into this line of work from a friend of his in law enforcement. He introduced him to the bondsmen, and basically what he would do is pick them up. You get the paperwork, you bring them in, and you get paid 10% of the bond. His first job was a badass biker that nobody wanted to go near. He tracked him down, shoved a 9mm in his mouth, turned him around, cuffed him, and was able to bring him in. As a wrestler, he knew how to easily hook and take people down. Again, that's an advantage. And what makes it work is, as a wrestler, it's a great line of work to go into, because when you're a wrestler and you get out of the business, it doesn't prepare you for anything. That's why last week when I talked about Dino Bravo, he went into the Mafia because he had nowhere else to go after wrestling, because it doesn't prepare you for anything else in life. Once you're out of the business, it's hard to find something. You know, nowadays wrestlers can go into Hollywood because it's another form of acting, but bounty hunting is the next best thing because you have tricks of the trade that you can use. Now he says the job takes him where the criminals go. Where they go, he goes. It may take him to Saudi Arabia. Wherever he goes, he's going to follow them, and he's going to be right on them. If you found him, you got paid. And if you didn't, you didn't. Simple as that. He dealt with everyone from hookers to drug dealers, and everyone on the streets knew him as Dr. D, which made the job easier because you can get into their house because they'll open the door for you. It later became a show with real footage and no make-believe. His favorite bust was saving 2 girls from a piece of garbage. The FBI couldn't find him for 30 years. The girls got kidnapped when they were 14 or 15 years old. When the guy would leave the house, he would chain them to the toilet, and the only way they could drink water was out of the toilet while he was gone. Schultz found him in Puerto Rico. He was in a bar and the girls were stripping on stage, and they had a baby in the back room with 2 Dobermans sleeping back there with her. David confronted him, and he jumped off the bar and ran around the side. David slid over the top of the bar, and he was going out the back door, and 2 cops pulled shotguns on him, and he jumped on top of him and cuffed him and threw him in the car. He took with him the girls, the dogs, and the baby. He got the girls back home, and the guy went to jail. He said, you got to be careful because one mistake could be your last one. So, obviously, Dr. D did a lot of good as a bounty hunter and was able to catch some of the toughest motherfuckers in the world. Meanwhile, back at the WWE, Vince does the unthinkable and exposes the business to the Athletics Commission and thus reveals it to the world. Wrestling is not a sport, it's entertainment. He does it to turn a bigger profit and rid themselves of government regulation. They succeeded. The Athletic Commission used to make everyone in the business get licenses. It would take a tax cut for the right to hold that event in their state. In some states, it would be 5 or 6% of the gate. Other states, it would take up to 10%. Eddie says it justifies everything he said, and that kayfabe is a bunch of crap. He was asked if he would ever forgive John Stossel, and he said, "It's not my job to forgive. It's God's job to forgive, and I'm not God." Great answer. Loved it. Many other states do the same in the hopes of having the WWE come to their state. Nowadays, Dr. D is driving a tractor trailer hauling cotton from the den to the warehouses. He'll do that for about 3 or 4 months. He works from sunup to sundown and then during the night. Jim believes that Dr. D's career would have ended one of 2 ways. Either A, he would have made a ton of money, or B, as the WWE became more cartoony, something else would have pissed him off and he would have gotten released then. Vince wanted to have a family-friendly show, and some wrestlers went with him and got their faces on ice cream bars, which we all know CM Punk used to bitch about all the time. David's problem wasn't that he couldn't be controlled. He just hated being disrespected. Don't we all? John says out of all the places he has done over the years, people still remember this one, and it's the second most viewed video about him on YouTube. I would love to see what the first one is. Dr. D has said he would love to sit down face-to-face with John Stossel and straighten all this out. And he says, "Don't worry, I'm not going to hurt you, boy." He says he doesn't care what they think about him, and he stood up for wrestling. And Dr. D, we as wrestling fans and myself who's in the business, I salute you for standing up for wrestling. When asked if something he could say to David Schultz, now, what would you say? John Stossel replied, "Fuck you, David." See? John Stossel had a golden opportunity to make himself the good guy, and all he did was remind us why nobody likes him. So I'll take this opportunity to say, fuck you, John Stossel. Fuck you. Fuck your career. Fuck everything about you. You are a piece of shit who tried to destroy the wrestling business for reasons that were fucking stupid, and you got slapped around as a result. You had this idea in your head that you can go around disrespecting people and there would be no repercussions. But there are. You don't want to get slapped around? Don't be a fucking prick. How about that? See, men, real men, we live by a code. Don't fuck with me, and I won't fuck with you. There's a line that you do not cross. Once you cross that line, you get smacked back to your side of the line. And that's with any guy, especially in the business. We love this business. We protect this business, mostly because it protects us. And I already said, the day the business no longer protects me is the day I no longer protect the business. And John Stossel learned the hard way what happens when you fuck with the wrestling business and when you insult the wrestling fan. You basically insulted people for being fans of something. And I never understood why wrestling is the only thing that gets criticized for being predetermined. For Christ's sake, Game of Thrones is fake. But everybody fucking worship the damn ground it walks on. Movies are fake, yet people spend tons of money to make them, and people spend a lot of money to go see them. And you get emotionally invested in them. For Christ's sake, there are people who are obsessed with fucking Star Wars and Star Trek to the point where they have their own fucking conventions where they go around just as Star Wars and Star Trek people. At least in wrestling, they're actually feeling pain. They're actually doing something. In Star Wars and Star Trek, the motherfuckers have stunt doubles. And their fights are clearly choreographed. The lightsaber is cheap special effects. But yet, people still go and watch it, don't they? I don't see John Stossel wanting to go off on movies. I don't see you going after TV shows, John. They lie to the public all the time. Your reasons for going after the business were fucking retarded. And you walked in there, and rather than try to learn something, you walked in there with an agenda. And you try to disrespect all these guys. And you forgot they're not just wrestlers. They're men. Men do not tolerate being disrespected. Men do not tolerate attempts at being emasculated. And if you try to go after a man's manhood, they will step up and beat your ass. Because they know if they cower, it ruins everything, wrestler or not. John Stossel, you got slapped in the face by Dr. D. You should pray to whatever God you believe in that that's all they did. Because there's plenty of wrestlers that if you had fucked with them, if you had done this shit in like the Crockett promotion or somewhere in the South, they wouldn't have just slapped you in the face. They'd rip your fucking body apart. That's all I got to say about this. I just want to get this off my chest. But this was definitely one of the most controversial moments. And of course, you know, if you get a chance to slap her around the world, definitely watch it. It's a great documentary. I highly recommend it. This will conclude this week of Boochcast Reviews Darkside of the Ring. Thank you guys for tuning in. Later this week, we got another one coming out for you guys. It's going to be a good one. It's going to be Herb Abrams and the UWF is coming up next. And that's going to come out later this week here on the YouTube channel. So make sure you guys hit the subscribe button and ring that bell to be notified so you never miss another episode of Boochcast Reviews Darkside of the Ring, as well as other additional Boochcast YouTube content. Make sure you guys are following us on Anchor, Spotify, Breaker, Google Podcasts. All the links are down in the description box. Make sure you follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Links are in the description box. Also, make sure you're following us on our Twitch channel and support the show through Patreon. You guys know the spiel by now. Links are in the description box. And until next time, pizza, baby!